These days, everywhere you look, there is a brand new nervous system expert, someone promising you to heal you through their work. There are many ways for us to heal the body. There's not just one myopic way. Welcome back to the Evolving Wellness Podcast. My name is Sarah, and today's episode is with my dear friend, Irene Lyon. So today, again, we're going to talk about that, break down some of these topics for you, and hopefully provide you with some real-life actionable tools. But how do you know who to trust and what actually works and what could actually be a danger to your body? Stay tuned to today's episode to find out more. Before we jump into today's episode, I do want to thank my two sponsors. The first one is going to be Viva Rays. They are an amazing source for circadian glasses. You can use my code YOGI to save 15% there. They also have great low EMF headphones, as well as eye masks and earplugs for sleeping. The second sponsor is Upgraded Formulas. I love their hair tissue mineral analysis with a consultation for understanding mineral balance in the body. Most people do have a mineral imbalance of some sort, and this can impact your health in many areas. So check out Upgraded Formulas. Use my code YOGI12 or YOGI if you've already used that one before. And let's go ahead and jump into today's episode with Irene. Thank you so much for watching or listening, whichever one you're doing. I'm excited to have my really good friend Irene here today. And, we talk offline quite a bit. We've been friends for a few years now. And, Irene, I've just been kind of pinging you lately. We've been going back and forth about a lot of these nervous system experts and somatic experts and things that have been coming out of the woodwork. So maybe we could have a little conversation about that. Maybe you talk about yourself first. I know my audience that they've listened to a lot of the episodes, they hopefully have heard you speak before. But maybe you could do a brief intro and then we could just get into this topic because I feel like it's just, it's really heavy right now.
Hot right now.
Yeah.
So I'm Irene, and I don't even know what to call myself. I'm just going to be really blunt because I am an exercise science major. I'm a biomedical. I have a degree, I can't even say it, a research degree in biomedical science, health science. So in my 20s and 30s, early 30s, I was all about fitness, exercise science, rehab. I was hardcore, you might not know this, on omega-3 fatty acids and
I didn't know that.
omega-6s and how bad omega-6s were or are. But this was before we were
For
all
the
crazy.
seed oil craze.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I was studying
You're ahead of the curve.
Yeah, like Lauren Cordain's work before he was known, because I think he popularized the Paleolithic diet. So these things are coming back, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I was looking at this stuff in in 1997 to 99-ish. So that's my background. And then some injuries, my own personal injuries with sport led me to have some pretty severe knee injuries. And my rehab needs were not being met with what I had studied in university, which was a problem because that was technically the gold standard: physical therapy, massage, exercise, rehab, working on your core, all this sort of stuff, which has a time and a place, but I just wasn't getting better. So that led me into something called the Feldenkrais method, which a lot of people don't know about, but it's starting to get a little more popular. That led me down really the mind-body connection. It's kind of maybe a similar story to you finding yoga back in the day for a way to de-stress. I remember you talking about that. So Feldenkrais opened my eyes to everything I didn't know about neuroplasticity and rewiring, in that case, how the body works and how the muscles fire or don't fire or stay contracted too long and tense. And it isn't just because the muscle was overworked, it's because the spinal system was out of alignment, all these things that I won't get into now. So that led me into the world of my body, started practicing Feldenkrais. I trained in it for 4 years. This isn't just a weekend workshop thing. It's like 800 to 1,000 hour training, which is almost unheard of these days. Yeah. And actually, I think back to that time, I'm like, how did we find time to go away for 4 weeks?
I know, that's how the yoga training was. It was like, And
and there were people who were moms and business owners, like people had normal lives, and they still figured out a way to train intensely back then. And this would have been 04 to 07. So did that, did a private practice, but then realized in my private practice that I was missing a massive piece. And what I realized after figuring out some stuff is it was the trauma piece. And so this was in about 2008. And again, it came to this head of, I don't know what to do with certain clients. And a lot of people in the health world who are avid health promoters, but also professional health people, most people will continue to learn and continue to find new things. And what's the missing piece of the puzzle for this person? Because clearly all nutrition isn't enough, exercise isn't enough. Oh, like for you, it was the light health and circadian biology. And for me in this moment of time back in 2008, it was trauma, it was the nervous system. So that led me to the work of Peter Levine, who's the founder of Somatic Experiencing. I went into that training, did that training, and then that just kind of exploded my world of learning about early trauma, pre-verbal trauma, developmental trauma, chemical trauma, past generational trauma, past life trauma, like all these things that impact humans. And one thing led to another, studied with some really great teachers, got into private practice, full-time private practice, probably doing too much. And then at around 2011-ish, 10, the online space started to really open up. And it became very clear to me that what people needed wasn't just me one-on-one. They needed to be educated the way I had in my SE training, in my Feldenkrais training, in my early trauma, developmental trauma training, which is the work of Kathy Kane and Steve Terrell. They don't really have a methodology name, so I always have to name them. So I just was like, this is essential, and it's not enough for me to just work and put my hands on someone for an hour and guide them through their somatic experience, tightnesses, emotions, memories, which was still really good work and important work. Like sometimes we need a lot of one-on-one work depending on our history, but so much can be done, just as you know, with your teaching, Sarah, by teaching someone the basics of their biology, how their nervous system works, what it does, how to be in their body, not disconnect from the body, how to feel the ground under them, how to connect with the environment, but also how to know when we're holding stress. And I don't just mean like I'm late for the appointment stress, like old, what we call survival stress, old traumatic stress. This is the tears that were never cried because if we did, we'd get hit, you know, or being ridiculed at school because we weren't quote unquote smart enough. So we were always put in the corner. Like this happened when we were kids, right? Like kids were put in the corner.
Yeah.
Kids were put in the cloakroom if they were like, it was a completely different world. And my
Kids
dad
were
was raised.
spanked.
Yes, my dad grew up in the world where kids had rulers broken over their heads and kids were had dounce caps put on their heads and put in the corner. And it was just like, wow, you know, you would never do that to a wild baby animal. You wouldn't hit them like that. The mother bear wouldn't hit her cub to, you know, these things. So all that to say, got into that work, got into online and created online courses in about 2012 through 2015. And one could say I was the first one. I'm pretty sure I am.
Yeah.
To put an online course online for the purpose of teaching people about their nervous system, teaching people about what trauma is, and then working with themselves in a self-study way. I even remember one of my business coaches, Sarah, told me when she saw my website, like my irenelyon.com website, you can't have that word nervous system on the front page. She said, no one knows what that means, and it'll confuse your potential customers. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to keep it on there. Something's telling me in my gut.
Good for you for listening. Yeah.
This will be known soon enough. And sure enough, it took a while. Like there were articles that I've written 5, 6 years ago that did not do well. And now they're doing really well.
Mhm.
And I just think people needed to catch up. So that's my general history. I'm not in private practice anymore. I do teach group. I'm about to start a teacher training. And that's me.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
very qualified
Mm.
to speak about the nervous system. And
Yeah.
also, after running multiple cohorts for
Yes.
over a decade, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Gosh, yeah,
in
almost.
yeah, which is unheard of in the online space. Most of us are, around for the last 5, 6 years, but
Yeah.
you've been doing this for a really long time.
Hmm.
And you when you do an online cohort, and I've learned this as well, you learn a lot through the
Yes.
years of teaching that
Yes.
makes you continue to refine
Yes.
what you're putting out there, how it's landing with people, how they're understanding it and implementing it. And I feel like I've learned a lot of that in the last, 3, 4 years, putting
Hmm.
out the work I have.
Yeah.
Um, and I continue to refine it and listen to feedback and have you've got ways that you interact with your students
Yeah.
on a very, very regular basis, as I do. And so there's a lot of refinement that goes into that. And for
Mhm.
me, when I talk about health, there's a lot
Mhm.
of learning that's gone on there as well, of where I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, this is a topic where maybe I need some outside help, or maybe this
Yes.
needs more explanation or
Yeah.
refinement.
Yeah.
And I feel like with the nervous system, especially with my experience as a yoga teacher working with people with
Mm.
their body, and in that setting, with
Mhm.
people that are carrying around a lot of things in their body and not really
Mhm.
realizing that that's what's going on. And I did go
Yeah.
through, I think it was like a 30-hour, maybe 50-hour
Yeah.
trauma
Module.
training. Yeah,
Yeah.
just to understand things you would never say in the framework of,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
there's a person in your class that has trauma, these are poses we would avoid,
Yeah.
these are phrases we would not say, these, trauma sensitive is what it was called. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I learned, even when I used those things, people would still
Yeah.
get triggered, people
Of
would
course.
still have reactions, people would still it wasn't
Things are going to
foolproof.
happen.
Things happen, right,
Yeah.
when you're
Yeah.
in that sort of a space.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of brought us to this conversation of this explosion online of, and I'm like looking at these people, I'm like, so you're a somatic expert, so you're a nervous system expert, so you're this, but like,
Yeah.
who are you? Where did you come from? What have you, like, what's your experience? And people are eating it up right now because they
Mhm.
are understanding, like you said, when you came out with this all those years ago and said, I want to put nervous system, no one really understood the
Mm-mm.
significance of that.
That's okay.
I was getting so excited. Um, but now
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I have XYZ health problem. I've done everything.
Yeah.
The nervous system is this missing piece. And so that's why I feel like these conversations are important, because I want people, yes, this is
We need to do
likely
this
a
work.
component that you need to
Hmm.
address, but you need to be careful in how you do that. So maybe I'll let you just take the floor
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll address the word somatic because
Yes, because
that
that's a
one
hot
seems to
one right
be a
now.
hot one. And
Hmm.
I frequent Instagram. I'm looking at things,
I do
whatever.
too,
It's like
more than I
going
should.
into a store and browsing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And one of the things I'm seeing a lot of, they're all ads. And it's not just one person. There's a few things where there's these really hot looking girls
Hmm.
in really tight clothes.
Hmm.
One of them has so many tattoos, nothing against tattoos, but it's just like she's got that look.
Hmm.
And she's laying there with her, again, nothing wrong with these movements. I do these movements in my classes and such, but legs wide open
Hmm.
or butt in the air. A
Hmm.
lot of the movements are actually what we would move through in a Feldenkrais class,
Hmm.
baby movements, rolling movements, crawling movements. But the script is saying these, and it's often an AI voice, which is
Hmm.
just weird.
Hmm.
These are somatic movements that I've done to lose my belly fat.
Oh
You
my
can
gosh,
do
I've been getting that ad too. I'm
you
like,
can do this too. And in 28 days, you will look like this. I'm like, you're not going to look like that.
Mm-mm.
Like, no. And
Mm-mm.
it's
Mm-mm.
exactly the same thing that we have seen since the 80s with the magazines at the grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
10 ways to get rid of your blah, 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 or
Mm-hmm.
10 ways to get bigger biceps or better
Mm-hmm.
love or whatever. So I want people to realize that is the exact same marketing ploy
Mm-hmm.
that is used in popular press. And now we're seeing it on Instagram using these buzzwords. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with those movements that those people are showing. But if I was to teach that, and I know this because I've been teaching movement since 1996, you can tell someone to do a movement, but if they're
Mm.
not connected to how the sensations arise, what to look for, when to stop, when not to override, and you know this
Mm-hmm.
as a yoga instructor,
100%. I know where you're
no
going.
trauma is going to be bloody well released. If anything, you take someone who's never even put their pelvis into that position because
Yeah.
of, say, a past trauma, and it doesn't have to be a sexual assault. It could be a surgical
Mm-hmm.
intervention within the pelvic area that was traumatic, where a person was being handled well, but they still tensed up so much and they have no idea that they're still holding that tension, for example. So you can put a person into that position, get them to move their pelvis, and a whole flood of flashbacks might come back. And if they don't have the capacity
Mm-hmm.
to contain, which doesn't mean hold in, it means be with and integrate the memory, the heart racing, the gurgling in the belly or the shutdown of the blood moving, like all these things can lend a person to either go into more shutdown, more freeze, or it can put them into a highly activated, I don't want to say dysregulated because they already are dysregulated,
Mm-hmm.
but it will put them into what we might call, I mean, the extreme would be psychosis, where or a disconnection from reality, where they become depersonalized from themselves, from reality, and they don't even know where they are. We see this a lot when people go into, say, plant medicine ceremonies and they don't have the tools to stay connected to self, tether to self, get support. Again, nothing wrong with these medicines, but they have to be used in the right context, in the right situation with a person who has some capacity.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing these somatic exercises, and I can tell you right now, it takes more than just doing a movement to
Yeah.
work with stored trauma.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one of the first things. And then I think the other piece is people underestimate how complex the human system is
Yes. Yeah.
and how clever we are at hiding these
Yes.
survival responses. And
Protecting. Yeah.
my best example is if you've ever studied or even looked at a TV show that highlights dissociative identity disorder, which used to be
Mm-hmm.
called multiple personalities.
Personality. Yeah.
The best show was with, I forget, the Many States of Tara with
Oh,
Tony
yeah.
Collette.
Oh, I used to
Do you
love that
remember that
show.
one?
I loved that show.
I mean,
Yes. So
watch
good.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that shows you, and because that's real, that isn't just
Mm-hmm.
a
Oh, yeah.
fictitious thing.
Yeah.
I've read about this in the past. That shows you how complex and tricky the system is to
Mm-hmm.
protect.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't open that up in a matter of a weekend or even a year. And so one of the things that's sort of the dead giveaway if someone is not really in good understanding of how this stuff works and isn't, we could say, I don't want to say professionally trained, Sarah, because there's some people who are professionally trained who don't really get the work, and that's
Yeah.
another story in itself.
Yeah.
But you can't say to someone, your motor vehicle accident trauma is going to be healed within 6
Through
weeks
X with this.
with
Yeah.
this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just, you can't even do this in medicine. A doctor isn't going to say after you've broken your femur and it's been plated in your rehab. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they might say, some will say it takes about 6 months for bone to heal, but everyone's different.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? Does that mean healed? Does that mean functional? Does that mean doing jumps again off
Right.
of, like, what does that mean?
Right.
So this notion that you can fix a trauma in a certain set period of time is, first of all, false,
Mm-hmm.
because we're so complex.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I'm seeing is because people are diving into higher, more advanced practices too soon. So a lot of people might be starting with meditation when really that's the last thing we want to do in this journey. We want to start with the basics of learning how to connect with the body, connect with the environment, connect with our biology.
Yeah.
This is where with the circadian work is so
Yeah, I feel like
beautiful.
the work that you do and the work that I do is like a perfect.
They're a match made in
Yeah,
heaven.
they really
It's peanut
are.
butter and
Yeah.
jam, it's like
Mm-hmm.
it just
Yeah.
goes together so well because it's rekindling
Mm-hmm.
our capacity to be in our biology with ourselves and the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff takes time. Like, you're working with someone who has a trouble with, say, their hormones, whatever it might be. 1 week of grounding isn't going to clean up their entire system.
No.
It's going to take time. But the thing that's different about the quick shake this out, tap this out, do some deep breath to remove this parasympathetic hold on the system, whatever it is, those quick fixes aren't connecting the person to the incredible nuance of memory, posture, the way the body moves and acts in the world, how the organs respond to stress responses. It's not enough to just get an emotion out. And I think there's been a lot of confusion that healing trauma means healing emotional trauma. And I see this also. I see a lot of folks who are talking about emotional trauma, and it's like, yep, emotions get stuck, but it's your emotions aren't traumatized. The emotions are pure. They might be stuck, or they might be hyperactive, if I use those terms, hypo, but they're not traumatized. And I'm even starting to shift that word trauma because that's getting thrown out like somatic.
Oh yeah, totally. It's
And so
everywhere,
I've been
everywhere.
sort of using the word survival stress, stored. The fancy term would be procedural memory, which is, if someone couldn't fight or couldn't flee because they were stuck in a situation, that is going to have it such that their system is storing that procedure of wanting to fight, wanting to flee. And so we need to understand these nuances. And if I go back to the dissociative identity disorder, if there's like a guard inside saying,
yeah,
I'm not doing this, you can get a person to pretend to fight by doing some boxing, and there's nothing wrong with boxing. It's a great form of exercise, but that will not complete the held fight. It has to come naturally from the system. It has to be generated from the system. The same way you cannot force a plant to grow faster. I mean, maybe you can. I don't know, maybe there's some fancy biology out there, but you give it all the right nutrients, all the right sunshine, water, the seed will open when it's supposed to. It'll poke through the dirt when it's supposed to. You can't speed it up. You can provide the conditions, right? The conditions for it to grow and thrive. And that's essentially what, at least if I go back to the work that I've created, we're not trying to get a person to do a somatic release. We're not trying to heal someone's emotional trauma. We're not trying to get a person to do somersaults, and get perfect body posture. And we're trying to give the person the conditions so that their nervous system can start to ease up with the survival stress. My classic example, I talk about a swimming pool filled with beach balls.
Yeah.
It's like we need to, which the swimming pool is our body, our capacity. The beach balls are the old survival stresses. And sometimes we don't touch the survival stresses. We don't touch it because the system is too guarded to keep them. So we build the capacity, we make the pool bigger. And if a person just imagines a pool with lots of balls in them, if you just make the pool bigger, there's more space for the balls to flow. And for so many people, they're packed so tightly with stress, survival stress, they don't even know that they have stored trauma.
No.
And so you can go through some of these quote unquote somatic exercises and releases and go through the motions. But if you're guarded, you ain't moving any of that trauma out. You're just rearranging it and getting maybe some flexibility in your hips and spine, which is not bad. But there needs to be more nuance, more sequencing, as I would call it, to the healing. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
I know you get it, but let me
Yeah.
know if there's something else you want me to clarify.
Yeah. I mean, I think the problem with a lot of the stuff that's out there now with the nervous
Mm.
system and trauma, and people are saying things like nervous system reset,
Oh, yes.
is that people, again, they're looking for like,
Quick.
and I remember, I think it was an episode you and I did maybe about a year ago. I had this woman on my YouTube comments who was really mad. She's like, well, I just wasted an hour of my life, because she was expecting for us in our conversation to give her a specific protocol
Yes.
for healing the nervous system. And
Yeah.
it's going to look different for everyone.
Yeah.
And it's not just that simple of something we could just talk about in an hour and just give a protocol. You know, like that's what I've learned from doing all of your programs. I've done the 21 day, I've done the 12-week Smart Body, Smart Mind. And it's paced in a way that you're doing what, you know, the educating piece of like, you really need to understand how this works.
Yes.
And you have to take time to build the capacity, right? I think building the capacity is what a lot of these programs and a lot of these people that are teaching this stuff are missing. Because for me, and I think I've mentioned this, I think I mentioned this the last time we talked, it's saved me going through whatever the universe has had planned for me. This is a turbulent period right now.
You're doing very well, by the way.
Thank you. It's crazy. I'll talk about all of it one day at some point, maybe. But I still use the things I learn in Smart Body, Smart Mind every day to keep myself here in my body and not, you know, and it's life-changing information, but it takes time for you to understand, why am I doing this? Like, what's it going to do? And then learning how to implement it in a way that is safe. And, but once you do it, like, it's a lifelong skill. I think I did your class in 2020 and it's 2024 now. I did this 4 years ago and I'm still on a daily basis using these things and helping myself go through difficult times. I hope you're enjoying today's episode with Irene. As I mentioned in the beginning of the show, all of her links, her free resources are in the show notes. So make sure that you check those out. And I wanted to ask a favor. If you are watching over on YouTube, please give the video a like, leave us a comment. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, head on over and give the show up to a 5-star review. Share it with a friend, with a family member, maybe somebody who is struggling with nervous system regulation and needs to hear this episode or one of the other episodes that I put out, trying to continue to provide free information for people who want to look at their health through a different lens, just other doors that you can open. And the thing is, I do believe that there are many ways for us to heal the body. There's not just one myopic way. So please remember that as you listen to my podcast, as you listen to these things, these are just other avenues for you to explore. I think we get caught up in wanting to have the absolute perfect right answer all of the time. But my goal really with this podcast is to just give you other options to explore, other tools, other things to look at. So I hope that you're enjoying it. Again, leave the show a review, a like, or a comment if you feel called to do so. I would greatly appreciate it. And let's jump back into today's episode. My fear of people kind of with this, like, I'm a trauma expert, I can help you reset your nervous system, and I can, maybe you talk about that, like why? Because I think it was a couple years ago, I shared in my stories your 21 day. I said it's a 21 day nervous system reset. And you were like, no, take that down. It's not a reset.
I correct anybody that says that.
Yeah. It's not a reset. It's a tune up. But
Yeah.
why would we not want to tell people they can reset their nervous system?
Well, the word reset, I mean, I don't know the etymology of it, but when we think about resetting or rebooting our computer, and oddly, a lot of times when your computer doesn't work, what do? You turn it off, you
turn it off and turn it back on. Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, it actually works because something's been jumbled, something's overheated.
Just needs a reboot.
It needs a timeout, right? But we also know that we're not supposed to put kids in timeout now. Like, that's a whole other story, because it disconnects them from the family system and it actually puts them into freeze. So our nervous system, it's not simple enough to say, let's turn it off and turn it on. First of all, if you
Right.
turned off your nervous system, you would die. I mean, that's a silly example. It's like, come on, Irene. Well, of course. It's like, yes, I know, but
Mhm.
um, I liken the learning of the nervous system education and practices to learning a second language as
Mm.
an adult. I've done some videos on this. If someone just pops that into Google, they'll find it. But what this means is most of us, and I'm generalizing here, did not get healthy, secure attachment growing up.
Mm.
We were not allowed to express and play. I mean, I get so much joy seeing James, your little one,
Mm.
just being a silly little goose, and you encouraging the baby talk and being silly and barefoot outside, and you're never going to say to him, don't, that's dirty. I mean, maybe dog poop, but
Yeah.
right, within
There are some
reason.
boundaries, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
It's like, get
Mhm.
in the dirt,
Mhm.
so many of us, we didn't have that, but then many of us were actually mistreated,
Mhm.
whether it was actual physical, sexual abuse, which so sadly is so rampant in
Mm.
homes,
Mm.
um, with well-loving parents. They just haven't healed their own stuff. But there's
Mm.
also a lot of verbal
Yeah.
abuse, toxic shame, emotional abuse, but also neglect,
Mm.
where you are not allowed to express that thing, that emotion, that action, that creative act.
Mhm.
And okay, so we'll park that. So many of us didn't get what we wanted, which means what we needed, which means that we didn't get good self-regulation.
Mm.
I'll go back
Yes.
to the nervous system. We did not build good self-regulation. We learned how to cope. We
Mhm.
learned how to manage. We learned
Mhm.
how to shut down. We learned how to throw a fit. We learned how to control and
Mhm.
manipulate, because we were probably controlled and manipulated so that our
Right.
parents got us to do the things that they wanted us to do. So
Right.
it's a mess. So
Mhm.
here we are as adults. We're living
Mhm.
in a way that maybe isn't the best. And we now know we're sick, we're unwell. And, there is so much evidence that connects chronic illness, mental illness, addictions,
Mhm.
bad relationships, the list goes on, to
Yep.
early trauma and that not being healed. So you're an adult, you can't replace your nervous system.
Mm-mm.
To go back to the reset thing, you can't just reset it, you need to relearn.
Right.
But for some, we're learning this language for the first time ever in our lives. So
Mm.
what we're relearning, I say to people, it's like you're an adult and you're learning a second language. And it's not as easy as when you were a little one, hearing the words, learning how to say A, B, ma, ba, one, two,
Mhm.
three. It's completely different. But as an adult, learning about your nervous system and learning how to self-regulate, we do need to do the ABCs and the one, two, threes. And they're pretty boring, but
Yep.
they also can be really mind-blowing, because a person has maybe never considered what it's like to feel their body in relationship with the ground, or their ability to see out in the world and orient, or one of the more groundbreaking things for people is following their biological impulses,
Mm.
like when they have to go to the bathroom, when they are thirsty, when they're hungry, when they're tired. The same things you would do with an infant and a toddler, the way that you teach co-regulation and self-regulation is through listening to their needs and then getting them to that need being met, whether it's hunger, cold, hot, temperature, don't feel well, I'm scared. You feed the
Mhm.
child, you hug them, you clothe them differently. They
Mhm.
want to engage, you play, you don't ignore them. And then when they don't want to engage, you don't force them to engage.
Right.
These are basic biological necessities of a little infant to learn how to self-regulate.
Mhm.
So part of the course, and it's hard to kind of package this for someone who's really new to this to understand, but what I have seen in Smart Body, Smart Mind, and why I think it has been so useful and has not just helped people with specific, say, conditions, but it's also improved their relationships. It's also improved their sleep, their creativity, their ability to just survive and take care of themselves. It's because we're going back in the program curriculum to these basics. We're not asking a person in the first week to shake their body.
Right.
Because why would I ask someone to try to shake their body unless we were like at a rave dancing? Like it's just not of necessity. What we're wanting to do is teach their body how to be in their body, how to be in their body, how to feel safety inside, and how to trust the healing that can take place. One dead giveaway, I just did a video on this, is if someone says, this is a safe space. You won't find anywhere on my website, we create a safe space for you to release your trauma or for you to learn. Now, the reason I'm very adamant about this languaging is if someone has preverbal trauma, developmental trauma that they don't know about, they might have no clue that they live with unsafety all the time. And one way to know is if I were to say to someone, can you think of the last time you felt safe? And if someone has to stop and think for more than a second, that means that they're not living in safety. It's something where you just know it. You are safe, even though your feet might be cold, it's dirty, you haven't cleaned up your house and you're a little stressed, you're inherently in good, you're good. Yeah. Stress is out there, but you're good. But someone living in unsafety, if you say to them, hey, Sarah, we're going to come and have this safe space so that you can share. And if you're not in that, you're like, you might not say it consciously to me, but there's instantly going to be a no. Yeah. That's not safe. Yeah. And someone with early trauma that is not worked with or they're not aware of it will be like, yeah, well, the space looks safe, but how do I know a gunman's not going to come through that door? Right. And I made the mistake once of saying this to a client in my office, true story. And I said, well, it's safe here. I was young. So, we learn by these mistakes. Totally. And she looked at me and she goes, how do you know that someone's not going to break down that door? And I went, you're right. I don't know that. I'm not going to argue with her and say, oh, it's a safe building and the door's locked. Like what? Someone could put a bomb there. Like that is the kind of way that someone who has been brought up in chaos or with violence will see the world. There's constantly an alert to danger that isn't even there. So to work with that, which is so common in our adult population because of this lack of connection, attunement as infants, in utero, at school, all these things, we have to go back to these basics of actually feeling your body. And some people will orient, one of the key practices, and 50% of the people that go to orient won't like it. A lot of people love it. A lot of people will orient and they'll be like, that's terrifying. It's too much to look out there. I can only look right in front of me. And then again, I would say, great, we'll look right in front of you. So someone who doesn't have the nuance will offer a set of exercises and it's just like, do these, do these, do these, do these. But if they haven't educated the person first on what might happen, you then have lost that person. And so this is where, and at least in Smart Body, Smart Mind, there is a much slower process because you have to teach people the theory. It's just like you can't have an engineer building a bridge that's going to house or take cars and trucks if they don't understand basic math first. Right. And so it's kind of the same thing. And what I think a lot of people have been brought into is trust the doctor. Right. And again, nothing against a good orthopedic surgeon or a good surgeon that we need for medical emergencies or something that is really not, we can't figure out. Yeah. But for the most part, they don't know us. A good doctor will get to know you They'll
Mhm.
ask questions.
Mhm.
They'll take your history in many, many different ways.
Mhm.
But we've entrusted the physicians, the healthcare providers to say, just tell us what I need to do and I'll do it.
Mhm.
And I know from being in fitness and health that telling someone to do something doesn't mean they're going to do it.
No. No.
And what you have to do is it's cliche, but when you educate someone about what they need to know
Mhm.
and you teach them the importance, a lot of people will pick up on that.
Mhm.
Those who want to. That's the other
Mhm.
thing
Yeah.
is this work does not work if you have no interest
Right.
in taking control of yourself and finding
Mhm.
your own healing internally.
Yeah.
Because it won't work to just, because some people have, I will say this, will have gone through the course, Sarah,
Mhm.
kind of in a rote way, like they'll just
Mhm.
do it,
Mhm.
but they're not engaging with it.
Right.
They're not seeing how they can integrate it into their lives. And then they'll
Right.
say, yeah, I did the course, nothing happened.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. Somewhere along the line, you missed the memo. You didn't get the memo that said this is a much more integrative process.
Mhm.
So one thing I will say in my earlier years, because you mentioned feedback,
Mhm.
I was a little green. I was a little naive to think
Yeah.
people would just get the information
And
and
do it.
naturally integrate
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
And I've learned, and so this is where I will apologize to my earlier students who like, yeah, I did that in 2015. It didn't do anything for me. And I'm like, yeah, that's maybe because I was still learning how to present this stuff online.
Mhm. Mhm.
But we have had way more positive outcomes the last sort of 4 years
Mhm.
with people because I have been more brave, if you will, to say
Mhm.
to someone, you just got to keep doing this.
Mhm.
You got to
Mhm.
keep doing the work. It's just like with circadian biology. You
Mhm.
could do it for a year and let's say everything gets fixed, but then you decide to throw it away and not do anything anymore and live
Mhm.
inside with light and look at blue light and never see the
Right.
sunrise, your
Right.
body's going to revert.
Exactly.
So there needs to
Exactly.
be this constant continual working with this material. But the cool thing, and you might attest to this, and I know this, is once you get it on board, your body craves the
Yes.
practice.
Mhm.
Just like it's impossible for me to start my day without going outside, putting my feet on the ground,
Mhm.
moving a little bit, getting electrolytes into my system.
Mhm.
Even if it's a little half-assed and not as long, I will still do it.
Yep.
And that's the part that shows me or might show a person, okay, this is part of my language, back to
Mhm.
learning a second language. It is
Mhm.
now my language. I might be not always perfect with it, but at least I know how to speak it.
Yep.
And some days I'm going to speak it more clearly, and other days I might mix up my words, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important. And the thing that I love about the Smart Body, Smart Mind, which I had to
Mhm.
do, was pause. And
Yes.
you don't have to do it in just the 12 weeks.
No,
You
I
have
haven't met
longer.
anyone who has.
I couldn't. I think I
It's
yeah, and I don't know that you necessarily, I mean, people, you put so much pressure on yourself
mhm.
to, I bought this course, I'm going to do it in the exact amount of time
Yeah,
that, but you have longer
yeah,
you can go back and
yeah,
redo it if you
yeah,
need to. And I put it on pause, waited a couple of months, implemented what I learned just in
yeah,
the first few weeks, helped
yeah,
tremendously.
yeah.
Then went back, did
Did
the
a little
rest of
bit
it.
more.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it took me a while to do all
yeah,
of this. And so I
yeah,
think people are like, oh, I got to do it all in one shot. It's going to be fixed. And I'm putting a deadline on myself. And you have to,
yeah.
that's the beauty of what you teach and understanding is that you can't force
Mm-mm.
your nervous system to heal in a certain amount of time,
Mm-mm.
even if you appear in your intellectual brain, have an idea
Yeah,
of, I want this done.
yeah.
You have to learn how to work with your physiology and listen and have that the education piece, I think, is
It's so,
huge.
it's so
It's
important.
huge. And it helped me heal more, I think,
Yeah.
too, to have that education. They're just like, okay, like now I understand what the heck is actually going on. No one's ever taught me this before. I wish we learned this as children in school,
Hmm.
you know.
Well, what you say there is interesting because if we had secure attachment and healthy attunement, and a positive environment with boundaries and being taught right from wrong and healthy shame, it would be part of our language, but it would be it would just be natural. And so I think that's the thing, is because I have some people ask me a very common question: Irene, can kids do the course? And it's like, no, they shouldn't have to do a course. They should be connected with their primary caregiver, and they learn via osmosis, via co-regulation, how to self-regulate. I've known some teenagers who have interest. They'll listen in the background if mom or dad are doing it, and then they might ask questions. But it's the same reason I would always say to someone, no, don't teach your kid how to meditate. They need to play. They're not meant to just sit still. When they are sitting still, engaged in a task, they're in meditation. Kids playing with a toy, they're with a coloring book, they're making make-believe, they're building forts, like all these things that we typically think kids should do, or we did at least, I hope. No, I did. That is like a meditative focus. That teaches us how to focus. And so we've gotten really kind of cookie cutter with a lot of these practices from the mind-body world that really are good in some respects for more advanced practice. But this basic understanding of our nervous system, how it works. And as you know, I don't just say, yeah, there's a sympathetic, there's a parasympathetic. We go deep into working with aggression, anger, shame, toxic shame, unsafety elements at the stress organ, like brainstem, kidney, adrenals, gut level. We're not just doing some felt sense guided following exercises. Like, it is very fine-tuned what a person learns in SBSM. And I do think that is, again, why it has stood the test of time, is we're not just doing theory, and we're not just doing basic tracking exercises. We're getting into like the deep visceral physiology. And the other thing that is incredibly unique is the blending of the Feldenkrais movement, which goes back to developmental patterns. It goes back to learning how to roll your body side to side, how to use your head properly, all these things that a baby does when they're given space to learn how to roll over, how to sit up, how to stand, how to crawl. We're doing that stuff. So that's the other piece, is it blends in the neuroplasticity element of how we would have developed if we had all the right things in all the right places growing up. The final thing I'll say on that, you're so right about the education, Sarah. And another kind of dead giveaway, if someone is not really understanding how this stuff works, is they'll say you don't need to know the education. You just need these practices. And while that might be true for a kid who's got secure attachment, we have fallen so far away from the tree in terms of our base level regulation that we actually have to understand what real rest digest is, what ventral vagal is, what the freeze response is, so that we can catch ourselves when we're in those different polyvagal states. And that's the part that I also see as missing. Even high-level health podcasts will not get that right. They'll say there's two nervous systems, there's sympathetic and there's parasympathetic. Even Sean Stevenson, and I love his work. He's got a very top-level podcast on health. Love him. And this isn't a hit against him, but he was describing to someone the other day the two nervous systems. He goes, we've got our parasympathetic, which is rest digest, and we have our sympathetic, which is fight flight. I'm like, true. And you're missing all the other pieces to the parasympathetic, which is also social engagement and the freeze response.
Right.
And so what I'm now seeing is some people are catching on to that, but they're still missing the nuance of rest digest versus the shutdown response.
Yeah, that's the nuance that I think most people miss, is they're just like, rest digest, like,
Yeah. Yes, that's true.
Mhm.
And we need it,
But
but
also, yeah.
also there's this other thing, and if you're sleeping but you're waking up completely exhausted,
Mm.
you're not going into rest digest. You're going
Right.
into a more of a freezy
Mhm.
response when you sleep. That's why you conk out so fast and you don't even know how you fell asleep.
Mhm.
Right. And these are the little pieces that if you understand the theory, as your system starts to shift and change, you're like, oh, I'm actually feeling a little more rested
Mhm.
today.
Yeah.
That's different. Or
Mhm.
my tummy's gurgling after I've eaten some food. And some people will get frightened
Mhm.
when they hear their stomach gurgle because they've never heard it before.
Mm.
And if you don't tell someone that that's actually normal, they might actually think something's wrong with them.
Mm.
These sorts of little things that we just
Yep.
don't think about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of
Yeah.
just explaining to people why you don't want to be willy-nilly with who you trust
Yeah.
with your nervous system. And if you want
Mhm.
to do this sort of work, if you have kind of done a lot of the things in health, like my work is, it goes really
Yeah.
well with yours, very, very
Yes.
synergistic.
So well.
Um, and you want to do this, right? This kind of buyer beware. And I always recommend people go to your YouTube channel. It's
Yeah.
free. You just
Yeah.
binge watch videos all day, all night
Yeah.
long, but get your sleep. Put your blue
Yes.
blockers on. Don't stay up all night binge watching
Yeah.
Irene.
Do them in the
Um,
day.
and you've also got another Smart Body, Smart Mind opening, I think
Yes.
is February the 13th. That's only
Yes.
open registration for about a week or so. Is that
1 week.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's mid-Feb, Feb
Okay.
13th to, I
Awesome.
think it's I'm not sure, the 20th or 21st.
Okay.
It's a Tuesday to a Tuesday. Registration is open for 1 week. We only open twice. We pretty much do it twice a year now.
Mhm.
So the next time will probably be October,
Mm.
which is a fair ways away.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a full pay, there's a payment plan for people who want to space out the tuition.
Mhm.
The one thing that's important to know is that it really is something that you work on at your own pace.
Mhm.
We are live in it, and there's
Mhm.
live calls, there's tons of support. That's the other thing, is you're not just given it like,
Right.
here you go. I have got 9 other colleagues who are fully trained in this work in our forums every day, usually twice, if not 3 times a day. So if there is a question posted in our many, many forums and threads about your process, about something you don't understand, about
Mhm.
you being stuck, that is there for you when we're in live session.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I haven't been in the back ends of other people's courses, but I'm pretty certain that this level of support does not occur
Yeah.
to this degree in other online courses.
Yeah.
Often they're just, you buy it and that's
And
it. And
that's it. Yeah.
even our 21 days has online, there's support in there. If you ask a question, someone will get back to you within at least 30 to 36 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, is you're not alone. And I call the 12-week program a curriculum now,
I like that.
because people hear 12-week and they're like, oh, I don't have time to do this in 12 weeks. And honestly, if you can work with the first few modules over a course of 3 months and then pick up the next few modules after that and just pick at it, it will shift. It will shift your physiology. It'll shift your understanding of how you live and work in the world. And there's also so many stories on our site. So that would be the thing for people to do if they're curious,
Mm.
is to go to the SBSM site and read or watch some of our students and what they're healing and what they're changing. Because even I think it's impressive. I'm like,
I do too.
this is pretty cool.
A lot of
This
great
is
stuff.
pretty cool. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'll make sure to link all that
Thank
in the
you.
show notes, and so people can check out your
Yeah.
free YouTube, check out the curriculum, programs
Mhm.
that you have, amazing stuff.
Mhm.
Have helped so many people, including myself. So I appreciate,
Sweet.
as always, you coming and chatting with me today, Irene, and for all the
Mm.
wonderful things that you do.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me again, Sarah.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening or watching today's episode, whichever one you did. I really appreciate you for being here. If you want to learn more about Irene and what she offers, please head down to the show notes for her links and her free resources. Fantastic way to educate yourself on the nervous system. She has an amazing library on her YouTube channel alone that can really provide some help and insight if you're struggling with that last little piece of your health. I also want to thank again the sponsors of today's episode very quickly. Viva Rays, use the code YOGI to save 15% off there, and Upgraded Formulas, the code YOGI12 or YOGI if you've already used that one before. Huge fan of their magnesium. It is a nanoparticle technology, so it bypasses the gut if you have gut issues, have issues absorbing magnesium. This is a really, really great avenue to explore. Again, thank you so much for listening. All of my free resources, my free guides are also linked in the show notes. So if you're interested in doing some of my work and just going the free path, that is always an option. I always keep those links down there for you to have. And you can always use the code podcast to save 10% on any of my courses. Would love to have you. And I hope you have a beautiful day.